catch that next time around. My name is Leon St. Lear, and I'm your host for this evening. And tonight we have a bit of a very special guest in the area. He's not local, but his name is Samuel L. Blumenfeld. I don't know if he likes Samuel, but I'm assuming that.
Oh yeah, that's my name.
He's a leading critic, foremost, what would you say?
Author.
Well, he's an author and educator, but you're a critic of the NEA and your
public
book,
education.
And public education primarily.
Right.
And he's written a book called the NEA, and I'd like to read some of the critics' response, or some responses that are relative to his book. And this is by Steve Sims, who's a U.S. Senator out in Idaho. He says, every so often a book is written that can change the thinking of a nation. This book is one of them. Also from a Dr. Walter E. Williams, who is out of George Mason University, the highly publicized report of the National Commission on Excellence in Education said we are a nation at risk from illiteracy. Mr. Blumenfeld's timely book points out the real risk is educational tyranny, and that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. Sam, welcome to the program. Nice to have you.
Nice to be with you, Leon.
Let me give you back your book, because I'm sure you've got a few more things that you'd like to say about it.
Yes, well, it has sold over 60,000 copies. It's in its 7th printing, and it has helped a lot of parents to see what is going on in the public schools. Okay. And not only that, but why the public schools cannot be reformed.
Okay, now you refer to a commission's report, or a reference to a commission's report. When was the book written?
This book was written in 1984, so it's over 10 years now.
And you've seen a change, obviously, for the better since you wrote it.
Absolutely not. Things have gotten much worse. The union has gotten much bigger, so my criticism of it hasn't harmed it at all, because now they not only include teachers, but also bus drivers and cafeteria workers and superintendents, janitors, I mean, you know, maintenance people in the union also. So they have over 2 million members. They are the largest and most powerful union in the United States because they virtually control the Democratic Party. They have more delegates to the Democratic National Convention than any other single group. Their people are in every state legislature. They have 50 state affiliates, and they lobby their legislatures every year for more money. Okay. As you know, education is a very, very big item on every state budget. In some states, it's 75% of the total budget.
Well, right here
I don't know what it is here in New England.
It's about 50% here in Billerica itself.
Right.
So it is quite a substantial sum, as a matter of fact.
That's right. And the schools are not teaching. They're doing all the wrong things. And one of the areas that I've gotten into over the years is this whole business of literacy and reading. And part of the problem is that they've destroyed literacy in this country. You know, we now have 90 million functional illiterates in America. Half the adult population has literacy skills so deficient that they might as well be considered functionally illiterate.
Half? We're talking about a 250 million people population, so we're talking a large number of people.
Yeah, of adults, and they've all gone to school. You see, that's the horrible thing, is they've all gone to school, and yet they've come out functionally illiterate. Now, how can you spend 12 years in school and come out not knowing how to read, or being a very poor reader?
School knowing how to talk.
Yeah. Oh, yes. You go into school having taught yourself to speak your own language. So the children are very intelligent when they enter the school, but in a very short time they begin to feel stupid because of the methods being used in the schools.
Okay, let's get into that.
These methods.
What is the cause as you see it?
Well, you see, back in the early 1930s, the professors of education changed the way reading is taught in American schools. They threw out the alphabetic phonics method, which is the proper way to teach children to read an alphabetic writing system. And they put in this new whole word look-say or sight method that teaches children to read English as if it were Chinese, a logographic.
Then you're saying that different languages require a different method of teaching. Otherwise, if you try to change the method for the wrong language, you'll interfere.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's what Rudolf Flesch found out when he wrote his book, Why Johnny Can't Read, which was published in 1955. Okay. So, in other words, we've known about this reading problem since 1955, when Dr. Flesch wrote his famous book. And Dr. Flesch said that when you impose an ideographic or logographic teaching technique on an alphabetic writing system, you get reading disability, you get dyslexia, you get all of the terrible things that are now
dyslexia, that's a disease. Isn't that caused by some germ, a virus or something like this?
No.
What?
Dyslexia is simply a term used to denote an inability to read, dyslexia, having problems with words.
It's not an
No, it's a condition that's brought about basically by the teaching methods in the schools. Now, there are some people who you might say are born with a tendency to be dyslexic, and that would generally be severely retarded people.
Okay.
Or somebody who's had a stroke, or somebody who's had part of his brain removed, or something like that.
There's been something physically impaired first.
Right.
And then you have a penchant for it,
yes.
or not, but you can or possibly can unlearn or learn how to speak and write properly with the proper...
But if you're a perfectly normal child, that is, you have perfect good hearing, speech, eyesight, etc., there's no reason why you should ever become dyslexic. And yet these are the ones who are filling the ranks of the so-called dyslexics in America. These are perfectly normal, intelligent kids who can't learn to read because of the methods, the teaching methods being used in the schools.
So when they came into the schools, they were perfectly normal, but as they continued to progress in the grade scale, they became dyslexic.
Dyslexic, reading disabled, and the result is that, of course, many of these children become quite miserable. Some of them become behavioral problems because, you see, these methods being used in the schools were devised by the world's leading psychologists, so they know how the brain works, you see. So if they want to mix up the brain, if they want to take a perfectly sane, rational human being and make him into and frustrate him,
so
what they do is they interfere with his rational faculties by using an irrational teaching method, you see? So it's like gears that don't mesh, so you get a grinding, and that's what happens in the brain. So that's what happens to these kids. They cannot accept the irrational nonsense that is being taught to them, so that they react physically in different ways. Some of them become physically disruptive. They call that attention deficit disorder. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Right. So would you say that an irrational mental order leads into an irrational physical order as well?
Or frustration, or a shutting down. For example, some of these children will just shut down their learning ability because they refuse to accept what they consider, what they feel intuitively is hurting them mentally, you see.
So it's a protective mechanism.
Yes, it is. ADD is a protective mechanism. Now, of course, the psychologists realize that. So how do they overcome that? How do they break down the resistance of the child?
I know. They medicate them.
Right, with Ritalin, you see.
I'm not familiar with the drugs, but that seems to be the
Ritalin
first thing. You always treat a disease with medication, right?
That's right.
And if they call it an illness, then it must be treatable with chemicals.
That's right, and they have a chemical called Ritalin, and Ritalin is the most widely used drug for school children today. I don't know how many children in Billerica are on Ritalin, but I'm sure that there are plenty.
Something that the school nurse will administer?
Well, what happens is they'll have some kind of a conference with the parent and with the psychiatrist or the psychologist and the counselor and the learning arts teacher and all of that, the language arts teacher, and they'll recommend. They'll recommend Ritalin, and then most parents will go along with it because Johnny is is
most
totally
parents wanting to do what's best for their child, not realizing that the cause of the problem is the school that
the cause of the problem is the teaching method.
The teaching method.
The teaching methodology devised by psychologists who want to stop the learning process.
Why is this so difficult for them to see? Or is it intentional?
Well, it is intentional. It is intentional. I mean, the nation is being dumbed down.
Okay.
And the reason why they want to dumb down the nation is because people are easier to control if they can't read. People are easier to control if they're totally dependent on television, you see. People are easier to control if they can't read their Constitution, if they can't read their Declaration of Independence. You can take their freedom away more easily if they don't. We're almost there, aren't we?
Very close, very close.
Wouldn't you say, Leon, that we're almost there, that where people are being deprived of their rights and don't even realize what their rights are?
Yes, absolutely.
They don't know what their own Constitution tells them. And so they don't know really the source of their political freedom.
Well, it's a strange thing. If you go into a court, you're charged with something, you're charged with an offense, and you ask to see the law, they refuse to give it to you, but strange as it may seem, after the trial, the judge instructs the jury of what the law said. So the first time, if it's the first time the defendant ever gets a chance to understand what the law is that he's being accused of is after the trial, and the judge is telling the jury,
yes,
from what you've heard, but if that's kind of after the chickens, the fox has left the chicken coop, because now you can't prepare or present any more defense, but it's the first time you've heard the law, or had an opportunity to understand what the law is.
But in any case, the point I'm making, though, is that this creation of an illiterate population is deliberate. In other words, the American people are an intelligent people. The children are just as intelligent today as they were when I was growing up and going to school, back in the days when they knew how to teach children. Now, one of the reasons why you have this growing...
Well, you're saying if it's a conspiracy or if it's a deliberate intent, they still know how to teach children. They refuse to teach them properly.
Oh, that's right. And that's the reason why I've written these two books.
Ah, okay.
How to Tutor and Alpha Phonics, because I wanted to give parents the means to teach their own children at home reading, writing, and arithmetic in the traditional manner.
Let's take one book at a time.
Okay.
Let's take How to Tutor. Now, what are you dealing with here when you're, what's the purpose of this book?
The purpose of this book is to teach parents, permit parents to teach the 3 R's to their children, reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 primary subjects. For example, in reading, we teach the alphabetic system, teach the child to read phonetically, how to sound out the words so that they can become good, fluent readers.
Knowing the sounds of the letters, knowing the sounds of various letters combined,
right,
and then being able to look at the word and sound it out.
Exactly.
And thereby, from hearing it, and having heard it probably used before, they will recognize it. Now they can place a meaning to it.
Exactly.
Or if it's
and it's not difficult to do. The instructions are very simple. Any parent who can read this can do it. Then I also have...
We're talking about only half of the population of the present country who are functionally illiterate. The half that can read it can teach.
Right, right.
The other half may have difficulty in it. I don't know.
Well, I also have an audio tape with the book in case they can't
Both of them or
read.
just this one?
Or this one.
Okay.
This one. Well, I'll get into that one. But in this book, I also go into the teaching of cursive writing because, as you know, in our schools today, they teach a child to print first.
Yes.
And they spend 2 or 3 years printing before they get into cursive, and by then their habits of writing are so fixed that many children cannot develop a good
I have
cursive
noticed that with a few
handwriting.
people, youngsters that I've run across that have learned that method. I didn't learn that method first.
Right.
Very heavy emphasis when I was going to school was on cursive writing.
Right.
Rather than printing. Printing was always, you'll pick that up, that's easy.
That's right, that's right. And the reason why it's so important to teach cursive first is because if you learn cursive first, you can always learn to print well later on. But if you learn print first, you may never be able to develop a decent cursive because of the way you've been trained to hold the pen.
Okay.
And also it's more difficult to print than it is to do cursive. They create, and they create many bad writing habits. And also, you know, I was taught cursive in the 1st grade. And one of the reasons why cursive is so useful is because it helps you learn to read. You might ask, How does cursive help a child learn to read?
Let me ask. See, you take the question right out of my mouth. Why does it, though? It's interesting to
Well,
have
I'll explain to you.
Okay.
In printing, a B and a D look very much alike. You know,
Yes.
you have the ball and the stick. So the stick is in this side or that side. But in cursive, a B starts like an L, and a D starts like an A. So they're two very different letters, and it's the knowledge that the hand acquires that is transferred to the brain and works with the reading process. You see what I mean? Because the child is constantly
it's a partnership,
writing.
then.
Yeah, yeah.
That denotes a distinctive difference.
Right.
Whereas the other shows or accentuates the similarity, where cursive writing denotes a distinctive difference.
Right.
So you do learn it. You do have something to learn, maybe I put it that way.
No, exactly. You're absolutely right, because a lot of children, when they print, generally tend to confuse B's and D's, F's and T's, G's and P's and Q's, you see, because of the ball and the stick kind of writing, which is prevalent in the schools. And also, it's very helpful for left-handed kids to learn cursive first, because you see, a right-handed person will tilt the paper counterclockwise.
Yes.
A left-handed person has to tilt the paper clockwise, and if he or she does that, then he or she must write from the bottom up, you see. Otherwise, if they're taught to print and they hold the paper straight, they will tend to hook, you see.
Oh, okay. Which is uncomfortable to me.
Yeah, and it's awkward, and it isn't. Yeah, it's an awkward position.
But the reason for that is in order to see what they're writing.
Yeah,
that's why
they can also see it if they write it at a slant. If they tilt the paper.
Yes,
to
they
the
see
far
it
right.
more
more easily, right?
Yes.
And they can't hook.
Oh, okay.
You
So
see,
it's more comfortable.
Oh yes, it is, and you'll find that left-handed people can write as beautifully, if not better, than many right-handed people.
Sure,
You see. And then, of course, I take up arithmetic, our basic arithmetic system, which is no longer taught in American schools.
Well, how is it compared? Off the top of your head,
Well,
what is
you
no
see,
longer taught? And
what they've done with arithmetic in American primary education is that they've subsumed it under something called math. So they teach everything at once. They throw in geometry, estimation, all kinds of things that they teach, set theory in the first grade and all of that, whereas our arithmetic system is a counting system. In other words, you don't have to know algebra, geometry, or trigonometry to be able to use arithmetic.
Right.
Do you?
No.
And there are very few people who use algebra every day.
That's
or
absolutely true.
Calculus or trigonometry or geometry. But everyone has to use arithmetic every day. I mean, going to the store, buying something, your income tax. I mean, even if you don't like to fill it out, you still have to do it.
You want to do it properly, otherwise you know you're going to get audit.
That's right. Your bank interest rates, bank accounts, your CD, or stocks, if you follow stocks, you really have to know arithmetic, you see.
So if you want to be successful, even in a semi-professional or as a craftsman, basic knowledge is mathematics, is arithmetic.
Yes.
Not mathematics, although you may use some of those, but it's arithmetic.
See, mathematics is really the study of relationships, while arithmetic is pure and simply a counting system. In addition, you count forward. In subtraction, you count backwards. In multiplication, you count forward in multiples. In division, you count backwards in multiples.
Right.
The only question...
I never looked at it that way myself until probably 10 years ago, and I said, all multiplication and division is a different way of adding and subtracting.
You're absolutely right. That's right.
Well, that's how long it took me to get healed from public education. But I want to talk about your other alphaphonics because every now and then I have a problem phonics. But we're going to take a break first.
Okay.
So, right after the break, we'll be back with Sam Blumenfeld, leading critic of the NEA, or public education, and he's going to say more on how he got that title and how he maintains that position. We'll be right back.
Paintball guns are used in recreational war games to simulate a hit. If combatants wear proper protective gear, the paintballs can't really hurt anyone. But as two Canton, New York teenagers discovered, they can be handy for stopping a crime. The two youths were waiting to ambush some fellow paintball enthusiasts when they witnessed a female jogger being attacked on a nearby jogging path. The boys fired several warning rounds, and as the attacker fled, they fired again, hitting him as many as 30 times. The suspect, covered with brightly colored paint splotches, was picked up by the police later. The Daily Times, Watertown, New York. Ski-masked burglars have been robbing and terrifying women in Des Moines, Iowa. But at least one criminal had the scare put on him. Adela Outing heard a noise in the middle of the night and saw someone on her patio. I got my gun and I walked up to him while he was trying to open the glass door, says Outing. I pointed my .357 right at him and said, "Can I help you?" That was enough to send the felon flying, the registered Des Moines, Iowa. It's nice for a change to have the innocent unharmed and the bad guys shot, said a police detective in Vallejo, California, referring to an incident at the B&N convenience store. A masked youth entered the store late one night and pulled a gun on the store's clerk, who reacted quickly and drew his own licensed pistol. In an exchange of gunfire, the criminal was mortally wounded. The clerk was saved by a shield of bulletproof glass. The Times, Contra Costa, California. Atlanta fireman Darrell Willis had stopped to use a payphone when four armed men approached and demanded his car. Willis decided to fight back, drawing his own gun and shooting two of his attackers. Willis suffered a gunshot wound to his leg, and all four criminals were apprehended by police at a local hospital. The Constitution, Atlanta, Georgia. Dennis Alameda didn't keep a gun in his Gilroy, California house for protection, so when he heard noises in his garage early one morning, he reached for his baseball bat. It wasn't there. That's when he remembered the old shotgun his grandfather had given him. It took a few minutes to find it and remove it from its case, and then he realized the only shells he had were in the garage. Taking the unloaded gun to the garage, he confronted an obviously intoxicated intruder and held him on the ground while his wife called 911. Almeida says he is now considering hiding a few shotgun shells in the house.
After I finish speaking, I'll speak again. We're back to the Billerica Open Forum. My guest is Sam Blumenfeld, educator, author, etc. And I don't mean that just to sort of wrap up things, because educator and author does have an awful lot of meaning, because he's the leading critic of the NEA, your National Educational Association, which is your largest union, but it's also is a primarily a teachers union, but now because of additional membership through custodians, other things of this nature, it has expanded to that and become the largest union, which is a large lobbying effort. And you're saying, from your observance of what they're doing, they're intentionally dumbing down our young people, our children, that we care so much about, and we take the time and effort to dress them properly, feed them properly, and send them to school for an education, and the education is destroying them.
That's right. They're not getting the education, because the NEA is basically a political organization, and all they're interested in is power and money.
Okay, that
power
seems
and money.
to be...
They're not interested in educating the children. They're not teaching them to read. They're not teaching them history. They're not teaching them the Constitution. They're not teaching them what this country is all about. They're into multiculturalism and, you know, transcendental meditation and all kinds of nutty things. Human sexuality, as they are, for example, in Concord, where they start in kindergarten teaching sex education and then wind up handing out or teaching them about condoms. But let's get back to the reading.
Let's get back to some ways that this could be counteracted or interfered with. Primarily, your first book that you showed was How to Tutor.
The How to Tutor, right.
Right, and so that these books are available. Now, I'd like to get, for those who wish to pursue this, your telephone number will be displayed.
Yes, sure.
And they can call you at a reasonable time.
Yeah, they call me at a reasonable time. I have an answering machine they can do. If they'd like to order, say, the Alpha Phonics book or the How to Tutor book, or even the NEA book.
Or do you have a list of books, publications?
My publisher, if they send for the newsletter.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment then, so that there are a number of books that are available. Call first and you'll be able to get back to them and,
Right.
take it from there. Okay, let's move this right along, because I think this Alpha Phonics book is an
Yes.
extremely important book.
It's being used by thousands and thousands of parents in America to teach their children to read, and it's a tutoring book. It's a direct tutoring book of our English alphabetic system. And as you can see, Leon, there are no pictures in the book, because I have found that children don't need pictures in order to learn to read.
But I noticed the writing is extremely large. Why?
Easy to read.
Yeah, well, all right, easy to read.
Well, it's very easy to learn our entire alphabetic system.
Okay.
And it drills them into
29
letter sounds.
29 letters, few punctuation marks.
26 letters,
Excuse me,
Leon.
26. Where'd I get the 29?
44 sounds.
Okay.
26
Thank
letters, 44 sounds.
I'm-
And we have a number of different ways of spelling the same sounds. That's the reason why we have problems in English spelling. But all of the instructions are in the back of the book. It tells parents how to teach every single lesson. And if the parents don't feel that they know how to teach phonics, or don't feel that they quite know how to do it, there are audio tapes that come with the book. A lot of parents can do it without the audio tapes, but those who never had phonics before and would like to learn it themselves.
Oh, now you're saying there's an answer for that, excuse me, that half of the country that is dysfunctional can also learn prior to teaching their children.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, any functional illiterate can teach himself or herself to read at home by simply listening to the audio tape and using the book.
Is this something that's given out at welfare offices for those who come in and they explain that they're functionally illiterate so that they can learn quickly by themselves without a cost?
Well, there are some, you might say, literacy organizations that are using this book, for example.
I'm being a little bit facetious with the welfare bit. But
it would be good if they did that.
That's
for
what
them.
I'm saying.
I mean, they would learn how to read.
This can be utilized self, because you have the audio and they can apply it to the written as well. Okay.
And considering the cost of the popular phonics program that's advertised over the radio, which is much more expensive than this.
Okay, because that would be a question. I'm sure everybody's seen that advertisement.
Yeah, and I've heard it, and I've seen it.
Sure.
But this, of course, is much less. It's about a tenth as much. And
honestly, how do you compare it?
Well, I would say that it's better.
Okay.
I consider this to be the best
let's
program.
make that clear. This is better.
Yeah.
Alpha Phonics is better than what we've heard.
The other brand.
The other brand, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Not
much
only is it
advertised
cheaper,
brand. Much cheaper.
less expensive. Maybe it's the other word.
Yeah,
cheaper.
less expensive, easier to use.
Comes with an audio as well as the written.
In other words, you can get the audio with it. It doesn't come with the audio automatically, but you can order the audio with it.
That is a separate.
It's a separate item for those parents who think they need an audio.
Okay.
You see, because some parents can teach phonics, they know the sounds, but many parents don't. So the point is this: that you need not risk your child becoming a functional illiterate in the public schools. You can make sure, you can do a preventive job by teaching your child at home. And you've got to make sure that that child develops a phonetic reflex.
Okay, let me throw a quick question, because my first response to that, if I've got my friends out there, they're all my friends because we live together in the town of Billerica.
Right.
And if they're having a problem with their child who's getting dyslexic, and my first thing is to get them out of the school.
Right.
Or, now this is what I want to ask you. If the child is not taken out of school, can you teach this course at home as an addendum to what they're getting in school and maybe minimize the damage or eliminate the damage being done by the schools? Is there a chance to...
You can do that. You can do that, although I advise the parents to take the child out of the schools for one very simple reason, that you're going to have two conflicting methods being used.
Okay. You don't want to add more confusion.
And you don't want to confuse the child even more, because the child will be learning one thing at home, and then in school they'll say, oh, no, that's not the way to do it. Don't sound it out, they'll say. Guess it, or figure it out on the basis of context. You see, they discourage sounding out in schools. Now, you may have some teachers who are emphasizing more phonics than others, But the overall method being used in today's public schools, called whole language,
Yes.
is holistically oriented. They don't want the child to break up a word into letters and sounds. They want the child to recognize the whole word as if it were a little picture.
That sounds to me like an attempt to disrupt their ability to discern a problem by
Yes.
breaking it up into its major components and then seeing where the solution lies.
You're absolutely right, because
This is what dumbing down isn't just there, it also
Yeah.
has adverse effects through the whole spectrum of mental
Everything.
gymnastics.
well, Leon, if you can't read, how are you going to learn history? How are you going to learn geography?
You're going to have to live it, and that's a tough way to go.
Yes.
It could be a little bloodletting in the process.
Yes, yes.
We've seen it.
You know, the interesting thing in the Soviet Union, for example, is that they tried the Dewey progressive system of teaching reading, the look-say method. And it created such problems for them, so much functional illiteracy, that the Communist Party in 1932 reversed itself. They got rid of the progressive Dewey method of teaching, and they went back to a traditional phonetic method of teaching children to read Russian, and of course, and also to separate subject matter in their schools, so that they developed mechanics, scientists, engineers who built that, you know, that Soviet
the
military
Sputnik and
machine,
et
the
cetera.
Sputnik
Sure.
and the
Mean tell
and
me
nuclear
if the
physics and all that.
Soviets, if the socialists could admit an error,
Yeah.
why can't the free thinker admit the same error in his? Oh,
Well,
but you're
because
saying it isn't.
it's
they,
not
they
an
know
error.
The error.
It's not an error as far as they're concerned. They're right on track. You see, when our Department of Education a year ago in September announced or gave the results of the survey that was made of adult literacy in the United States, and announced that 90 million adult Americans are deficient in reading, half the adult population. They didn't consider it a great crisis. I mean, have you heard anything about it? I mean, you've heard of the budget crisis, this
Right.
crisis, the health crisis. Have you heard of a literacy crisis that Clinton is doing something about? Did he order the schools to sort of get back to phonics? To get back to basics? No. You know what Secretary Riley said? What his idea of a solution to the problem was? He said, well, these people ought to go back to school for a tune-up.
Right.
For a tune-up.
But that's what they were supposed to have done there in the first 12 years, is
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
the original
Yeah.
vehicle, and
And if
you
they've
will,
come out functionally illiterate, a tune-up is going to...
that's saying they came out needing a tune-up.
Right.
So he's saying go back for one.
And
But
what
will
kind
the
of a
schools-
tune-up are they going to get?
Right, the same one that they got
Yeah.
when they were finished. Very strange, very
Yeah,
strange.
we have
yes.
we have a government that's deceiving us. We have educators that are deceiving us. We have
And of course they can't do that because they've made us functionally illiterate.
That's right.
If you will.
Because, you know, they'll blame it on the child. They'll say, well, the reason why your child can't read has nothing to do with what we're doing in school. Your child is learning disabled. Your child is dyslexic. Your child has something wrong with him or her. He's got attention deficit disorder. So we will fix up your child by giving him a drug, or putting him into Chapter 1 or special ed, where they do more or less the same
We're
thing.
going to treat him special.
Yeah.
You're going to get special treatment. Your child's
Because
going
he's sick.
That's the way to sucker the parent into
Yeah.
thinking that they're very
Oh, they're lucky.
compassionate.
Oh, yes, to have all these people worried about their child's problem.
So this is a false compassion. It's meant to control and dumb down and to maintain that control.
Not only that, but it creates a whole cadre of counselors, psychologists, remedial teachers, all of which requires more money.
Building up the school system,
You see,
expansion,
functional
expanding the
illiteracy
budget.
is very expensive. First of all, you need specially trained teachers to make sure the kids don't learn to read. Special reading programs that make sure the kids don't learn to read.
And frustrate them in the process.
Right.
Okay.
And this is all very expensive stuff.
So you
see,
get
it's
them on
very-
medication, which is more expensive.
And that's
for the
more expensive. You see,
medication.
it's easy to teach a child to read. Here's one little book that can do it.
They already knew how to read, how to talk when they went
Right.
into school. Now all they had to do is learn how to put it on paper.
That's right. You've got it. You said it.
Okay.
You said it. That's all they have to learn to do. But the schools don't do it that way. Now,
Okay.
if any of your viewers would like to get any of these books, they can do so by calling my number. I live in Waltham,
Okay.
so they can obtain the books locally through me. I wish the books were distributed in bookstores, but the problem with the big bookstores is that they don't want books from small publishers because they don't want to have a lot of little, little
They'd rather look at one
accounts.
big book and all that stuff.
A lot of little accounts. They
Okay.
want one big account.
But then they'd
from a
have to use their
wholesaler.
math. They also came from the same school that didn't teach them math. So
Well,
that
it's all
would-
done by
Right.
computer, like at McDonald's. They just press buttons. Nobody does anything.
Right,
That's
Big
the-
Mac.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, but that's what it says on
Sure.
those keys.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Oh, yeah.
give a number. It
No, it
says
just says Big
picture.
Mac.
Oh,
right.
Big Mac, right.
Yeah, it doesn't say how much.
Right.
Or, say small fries.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But you had something about a newsletter?
yes,
that
I
you have?
also publish a newsletter, the Blumenfeld Education Letter. As a matter of fact, I happen
Okay.
to have a copy here,
Okay.
which I can hold up for your audience. And this
Sure.
particular issue, which came out in December, it's an open letter to the
Why
Congress.
don't you just hold it down in front of you, then this camera will pick it up.
Yeah.
But while that's going on, maybe we can throw up the number to call for
the
that
books.
newsletter.
Yeah,
for the
or for the newsletter. They can get a free sample copy of the
Okay.
newsletter by calling the number.
Okay, we
on
have
the
that
s-
separate.
on the screen.
So, okay, so, right, we have that there now, so we can call that number, right?
That's for this. Now, for the book, they call my Waltham home number.
Okay.
For the book, for the Waltham number.
Okay.
For the newsletter, the Idaho number,
Okay.
the 208.
Oh, the 2A is Idaho, okay.
Yeah, is Idaho.
And that's to give them an idea of what would be the current publication, the current issue, or?
Yeah, the current issue is on the Nalepa case. Now, this is a very interesting case of a youngster, of a second grader, who in Michigan was shown a film on suicide. And the next day,
A second grader.
a second grader in the second grade was shown a film on suicide without his parents' knowledge or permission. And the next day, that youngster imitated what he saw in the film, and he hanged himself. Now, children imitate
Yes,
things.
this is one of the ways that they learn.
They learn by imitating. And so this little youngster decided that he's going to do what he saw in the movie, and he accidentally killed himself.
Right.
Now, the parents sued the schools. They sued the Encyclopedia Britannica, which distributed the film. They sued the makers of the film, which was out in Utah. And the courts decided that this case could not be litigated because it was about educational malpractice. And the courts decided that if they permitted educational malpractice to be litigated, there would be a flood. They would be inundated with cases.
So the
So
court
they're-
recognizes the problem.
Right, and decided not to have nothing to do with it. So in other words,
Okay.
that would be as if the courts decided that there's so much medical malpractice that they're not going to have any more medical malpractice cases. I mean, in other words, there's so much rampant educational malpractice going on in America that the courts refuse to handle it.
So much for jury, the people.
Oh, they didn't have a
deciding
jury. The
on-
Nalepas
Right.
didn't have a jury.
They didn't even elect for one?
Well, they wanted a jury.
Okay.
The court
And the court refused.
refused.
So the court is saying you can't even bring this case. Sam, we've got about a minute left. Something you want to say other than...
Well, all I want to say is that
You're
if the
delighted
parents
to be here at the Billerica
Delighted
Open Forum.
to be here in Billerica. I'm a neighbor. I live up in Waltham. I've lived
Sure.
in New England. I'm originally from New York, but I've lived in New England for the last since 1965. So that's 30 years, and I've spent a lot of time helping parents teach their children
But
at home.
You also...
I taught.
You're a guest here.
Yeah.
Now, would you, if somebody wished, some organization, would you come down and give maybe a little bit more
More than
time?
happy if there's any
Okay.
group here in Billerica that would like me to come down and teach, talk to them about this
Sure.
problem. Be more than happy to do so. I've done it in other towns
Okay.
where groups have invited me. So it's been a very, it's a very satisfying experience to know that this is helping so many children learn to read.
Yes,
You know.
yes.
And
you make it so clear, though, that
it's
you know,
easy.
you support everything that you said through
Leon,
sensibilities.
it was done for a couple of hundred years in this country very nicely.
Yes, it was.
Until about the 1940s and 50s when they changed things. But if you go back, if you go to look at the primers that were used back in, say, 1840s and 1850s, these are little books that taught children to read very beautifully. And as you know, the Founding Fathers were great readers and great writers and farmers. The Federalist Papers were written for farmers, for the average American to read.
Not the Farmer's Almanac that was put out there in the outhouse. This was a book that was treasured by the Federalist Papers and publications like that.
And the interesting thing is that many of today's college students can't read it.
It's amazing.
But yet, back in those days, your average American farmer and individual could read it, you see.
Thanks again for being here. Maybe we'll try it again some other time.
Pleasure, Leon, anytime. Just give me a call.
We're going to take a break right now, but we will be back with Gene Dundee, and we're going to give some commentary, whatever that might be. So, surprise, surprise, surprise. We'll be right back.
Break down the front door. They went to their parents' room where the oldest, 13, aimed his mother's .357 mag at the locked door while his brother dialed 911. The intruder entered the house, headed straight for the bedroom, and tried to force that door open. That's when the oldest brother fired one shot through the door, killing the criminal. Police found rubber gloves, a folding knife, and a large screwdriver in the man's pockets. The boy's father says the firearms training the boys received probably saved their lives. The World, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oakland, California resident Ella Brooks was taking the bus to her job as a security guard in San Francisco when another passenger, who had refused to pay his fare, pulled a knife and held it to the throat of an innocent bystander, threatening to kill him. Brooks brandished her .45 in order the crazed criminal to drop his weapon. He did not, says Brooks. He was so close to the other man that for a while I couldn't do nothing. Then he moved his head 3 or 4 inches to the right. That's when I shot him. Police officials said the incident appeared to be justifiable homicide. The Examiner, San Francisco, California. If homeowners shot a few more burglars, it might act as a deterrent to the next guy thinking about breaking in somewhere, said Bucks County, Pennsylvania District Attorney Alan Rubenstein. He made these remarks after announcing that no charges would be filed against Frank Luciano, who shot and killed a man breaking into Luciano's tool shed. Luciano and the culprit, a career criminal just released from prison, engaged in a struggle that ended with a blast from Luciano's 12-gauge shotgun. The Courier-Times, Levittown, Pennsylvania. A High Ridge, Missouri woman who runs a beauty salon in her home had just finished with a customer when a masked man entered and assaulted her. She managed to break away, run upstairs, retrieve a .45 from her bedroom, and confront her assailant coming up the stairs. The tables turned as the sight of the gun was enough to send the perpetrator packing. The Journal, Jefferson County, Missouri. 80-year-old Louis Sylvester of Toulminville, Alabama, pulled into his driveway. In his car were his walker, which he needs to get around, and a .38 caliber pistol. He was approached by a young man brandishing a sawed-off .22 rifle and demanding that Sylvester surrender his car. Sylvester said he needed his walker to get out of the car, but instead of reaching for the support, he grabbed his gun and shot the would-be carjacker, killing him. The Register, Mobile, Alabama. In what has become an all-too-familiar scenario, a 4-year-old Hampton, Virginia girl was attacked by a pair of vicious dogs at a neighborhood playground. Fortunately, neighbor Du Bois Duke heard the child's screams. I saw the little girl on the ground with one dog holding her neck and the other biting her thigh, says Duke. They were ripping her apart. Duke loaded his pistol and raced outside, firing twice to scare the dogs. When they ran off, he rushed the girl to the hospital, where she received more than 40 stitches.
They put us back on, Gene.
Oh, they did.
Gene Dundee is here with me right now. And welcome back to the Billerica Open Forum. We've been talking the first 2 segments of the program with Sam Blumenfeld. We hope you've taken down his numbers, and if you have an interest, to give him a call. He's a delightful gentleman to speak to, so he can go on and on and on and help you in those areas that you have an interest relative to education and possibly speaking in some other capacity for a group that you might have. But I want to get to Gene. We haven't got much time left. The time goes so fast when you're having fun. You've been sitting out there watching the monitor.
Chomping at the bit.
Oh, chomping at the bit. And the first thing you say is that old die-hard thing of yours, all your problems, as Sam bringing some problems forward because of your lack of understanding, of the state constitution, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All
Yep.
right. So relate,
Well,
please.
all these things that he's talking about, and I think anybody who walks out into the public can see this is exactly what is happening. The children cannot read, they cannot write. And we do have, I don't know what the budget is for special ed, if you will. And of course, the other thing that's just coming to mind is they go through school, they graduate, and then they got to take a test to see if they learned enough, as I understand it, to see if they learned enough in school, which to me is kind of ridiculous. But yes, to getting back, I hear from the homeschoolers, I hear from the parents, I do hear bitching, moaning, and complaining. And I do have to go back to that statement that every one of your problems is because you lack the knowledge and understanding of that state constitution. And it amazes me that so-called educators, and I'm going to, if not to grade your host, your guest rather.
You always degrade
the
host.
Or not to demean him, but I wonder, when I talk about education, it is a learning process. It's where the mind is opened up, if you will. In education, the first thing I want to be able to find out or learn how to do is to define a problem.
Okay.
Because what happens in the business world or in our personal life, in many cases, we define a problem that we think is the problem. But basically what we're defining is a symptom. And we go about curing that symptom. That's the worst thing we can do.
Well, it seems what Sam pointed out, the first thing that your NEA wants is more money to generate more power, more money, and it's a,
but what's the symptom?
Dog chasing the tail routine. Right, because it isn't a problem to them, they're gaining, but the people see what they're offering as a solution. They can't see that that's not the solution because they haven't defined the problem. They've accepted the problem defined by the very creator of the problem.
And I'm glad he came on the program tonight, because another thought went across or occurred to me tonight. You know the difficulty that we have in bringing the Constitution to an individual and having them read it. Without
very strange results, but anyways.
Without an exception, it's all the same basic reason why they won't pick it up and read it is because they can't understand it. Very interesting to me, especially in the light of what he said. The people have been so conditioned they can't read the English language, and especially when it's something foreign to them, when they've been taught something different. When they see the reality or what their life is like, now they read something that is contrary to that. Now they can't accept it. They can't read the words. In fact, we had an occasion in one of our little gatherings that they physically couldn't read a word.
Yes.
Physically
very
couldn't
strange response.
Yes.
Right.
But let me get back on the theme. The reason for this is that, yes, we have problems, and there are deep problems in the education system, but they fail to see why. What is the root cause of it? And the root cause is one thing. They have allowed government to take over their business. And I have no, how do I put it? That's their own fault, pure, plain, and simple. If you don't take care of your children and you take your own responsibility and your duties and obligations as outlined in that document, this is exactly what's going to happen. People are going to take over your life. They're going to take over your liberties. They're going to take over your children. They're going to take your children away from you.
Right.
Why? Because you don't know any different.
Right. Well, I don't want to give them an excuse, but one of the things that Sam pointed out is this process deprives them of their sensibilities, if you will, the use of common sense, because in the process of teaching like language in the wrong fashion, it attacks the mental gyrations of the brain,
You're right.
And so it causes them to get upset, to become rigid, to reject, to become withdrawn. All these deprive them of their sensibility, because no sensible person is going to do as some of these children have been found doing, hiding in corners, cowering under tables and things of this nature. Children are concerned. They look at large adults and they have a natural fear, but these seems to be irrational fears, which seems to be the intent of the education, to get them to do irrational things so that now they are more pliable. So he said they're after power. Money is power. They want more money to maintain power and get more power.
But
so what he said didn't
But that can't take...
supports what you're saying.
But that can't take place.
Right, I didn't want to give him an excuse.
Right. That cannot take place if the people are honest with themselves.
Okay.
If they, in fact, want to be free and they want their liberties and they want their rights. If they really want that, that cannot happen.
Regardless of functional illiteracy.
You got it.
Okay.
Because it's so simple and so easy. As you know, the first thing we ask people to do is to do what? Go to the town clerk, go to the town hall, and pick up a book. It's free of charge.
Right.
But even that little exercise seems to be so difficult for them to accomplish or to do, to even think about. And if you can't do that, and here's a book that'll set you free. Right. It'll give you an answer to every one of your problems. I don't care, once again, whether there's a pothole in your street, whether it's street lights, whether it's sewage, whether it's because my children is, what do you call it, needs a special ed course. I don't care what the problem is. All I'm saying is go to your town hall, pick up a copy of that book, and start to read it. That's simple. And this education problem will go away.
If you have trouble reading it, get Sam's book.
Get Sam's book. There you go. Now there's two things.
Two things working together to get you back to sensibilities.
Yes.
If you will.
Yes.
And this seems to be one of the points that Sam was referring to, that because of that, you've got to, as you're trying to point out, the Constitution is a very sensible document, easily understood, easily read, because all the truths in it are basic. And once you've got the basic truths, like the child who walks into the class on the first day of school already knows how to talk. Now they just have to learn how to put it down on paper.
There you go.
So they already have the sensibilities of understanding and composing language. They don't know what a subject, or verb, or an adjective is, but they can put them all together in a syntax that's easily understood by their peers and their parents.
Yes.
So that they get the things that they need in their life, etc., in the family unit.
Yes.
And so you're saying now, if you go to the Constitution, this is the meat,
yes,
if you will,
well,
of your social structure.
But we have to go to government. We have to go to the judge. I was really interested when he said there's a court case came up. It was in Michigan, I believe, and the judge says, no, we can't do that.
Right.
And yet we believe him, don't we? We believe the judge.
That it can't be done, right.
Oh, wait a minute. Something's wrong. Am I a free man? Is this a country? Is this the land of the free?
Okay.
And the home of the brave? No, it isn't. I'm saying it's the land of the slave.
Okay, so what?
And the home of the coward.
Right, obviously, because what they're doing is that these people have said that judge is correct.
Yes.
We can do nothing about this problem.
We can't fight it.
We can't fight it. So because of the people's ignorance, they're saying there is no way that we can counteract what that judge says.
No.
And you and I, from our understanding of our state constitution, know there is.
No, I'm not saying it's from their ignorance. I'm saying it's from their fear, their cowardice.
Well, ignorance may be, okay.
Okay, I'm saying
Okay.
it from their cowardice. It's not,
Okay, then that's
it's not
another-
ignorance.
Okay.
Because to be ignorant means...
Just to have lack of certain knowledge.
Right, and
Okay.
inherently, we all have the same ability.
Well, wait a minute. Maybe there's another a coloration to this dumbing down situation. It not only deprives you of your common sense, but it makes a coward out of you.
You got it. You got fear. In other words,
Part of the process is to harass you, to irritate you,
bow down to me, the sovereign.
and the child knows there's something wrong with that.
Yes, and
And
that's
doesn't know
why,
how to deal with it.
that's why the children are rebelling in schools. That's why they're tearing them down.
Okay, that's...
Because they know inherently there's something wrong with that system.
Okay, let's get to a solution then. The solution for the child. We may have children in our audience. What's the solution to them? Get a copy of the Constitution.
You got
and reading it, start understanding that there are
is another way.
things. There's another way, and there are sensible ways to respond to the stupidity, lack of knowledge, unsensible things that are coming out of the school at them.
Yeah. Yes.
Now they'll have not an argument, but a debate. An argument is not...
Well, what's going to happen, they're going to start asking questions.
Okay.
What about this, Mr. Teacher?
Okay.
What about this, Father? What about this, Mom?
Right.
What does this say?
Right.
You're not following it. You don't agree with it, but wait a minute, that's my inheritance.
Aha.
My forefathers left this here for me.
They spilled their blood to give this to me.
Yes, it's mine.
Okay.
Now you're telling me that's wrong?
Uh-huh.
Or are you telling me that you don't know? Now, why would you hide that from me? Why would you want to keep that from me?
Uh-huh.
What's your motive? What's your reason? Oh, you're afraid now too? You're afraid of your government?
Uh-huh.
You have got to be told what to do and how to do it? And you're supposed to be my parent? You're supposed to be my guidance? You're supposed to guide me in my life until I'm old enough? Something's wrong here. Something's amiss. That's why our children are rebelling against our parents, the parents
But
also.
wait a minute. We know that children have rights, and
Ooh.
2 weeks from tonight, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth.
Yes.
We have a copy of the, what is it, the act that came out of the UN of the
Right,
children's rights, and we're
But
going to
do
go
they-
through and enumerate those.
But do they
various
have a
things.
right to have good parents, wise parents?
Gee, I don't know. Maybe it says it in that document, and we're going to have to peruse that. But that's
Okay.
what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And we'll have those documents, have them in here. We have the telephone number if anybody would like to call and comment on anything that we're saying. It's always there. The lines are always open. But we're going to talk more about that. I don't know how many...
We'll talk about children's rights, yes.
Children's rights, and I don't know how many we have that are listed.
Oh, 30-some,
Strange thing,
40-some.
but we don't want to let the cat out of the bag. There are so many things in that. Well, I don't know how much time we've got.
But wait a minute.
We've got about a minute.
If the children have, 30, 40 rights, do I have the same right as an adult, I wonder?
Well, you know, it's strange. We have the children have rights that I don't see an adult have, and I see something, this is very strange. How can one individual, I don't care about his age, his mentality, race, creed, color, where he comes from, whatever, how can he have different or different rights than me? Aren't rights human in nature, so they encompass all human beings? So if a child has a right, then I must have it too.
Yes.
But maybe this goes along right with what Sam is saying. They're dumbing us down by changing the meaning of the words.
Oh, definitely.
You looked up the word education. What did you find?
It means means to rear.
As in?
And children, to rear your children.
To rear your children.
Yes.
See?
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. That isn't what everybody says it means.
Nope. It's to
Strange
train,
things.
that type of
Okay.
thing. But you know, do you have a right to walk up to the town clerk and ask for a state constitution? Is that one of your rights?
Well,
Why don't you exercise it?
Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you want to exercise a right?
And it's so simple, so easy, and it's free.
They're
And
gonna-
you get it now.
The
You
time
will
ain't
get
free.
educated.
The time ain't free. They're kicking us off. We have to go. Folks, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Again, we'll be talking about that. See you then.